Let's talk about layers, one of the most important concept in JavaScript and one of the most asked questions in interviews. And we will break down every single thing in the layers. Just layer is basically the combination of two functions. Like one is the outer function and one is inner function. So when we execute the outer function, the inner function gets a reference to its surrounding data. Okay, and they can say the data or state whatever you want. I'm gonna explain you this just with the examples, but just now I'm giving theoretical overview of the layers. I think that's pretty much for theoretical point of view, and let's jump right into the layers and then we will break down everything inside of that. So let's create a function, outer function, or let's say outer function, and inside that we will have another function. Okay, so we are bundling up or combining the two functions. So we have two functions. Now we are gonna be doing is, let's add something into an outer function. Okay, and we will add counter is equal to 0 to our function, and in inner function we will add this is inner function would do is take a parameter called num, and this would do is return num plus 3. Okay, add 3 to the num and then return that. Now we are in the body of our function. Okay, so we are getting outside of this, after this the closing of inner function we are calling the inner function. And so whenever the outer function executes, this line executes and this line executes, and when it comes to line 158, the inner function executes automatically because we are calling that in line 158. And let's call this outer function, and let's take this whatever the output of that outer function in some variable. Let a result is equal to outer function. So we are calling the outer function, and whatever the output of that outer function is going to be stored into the result. Okay, so we are gonna jump right into the Firefox DevTools, and we're gonna go into here, Control Shift I. We're gonna open up our debugger, and we are gonna be doing is that counter. We're gonna add some breakpoints. Let's execute this function and let's see what happens. And we are gonna after the execution we are gonna log the result as well to check if we get something or not. Okay, so we're gonna play that. Now we are at line number 161. Okay, so this line is gonna be executed first, and right after executing we'll get into the outer function, because we are calling outer function at line 161, and we'll get inside of that, and we are now declaring a counter to 0. And we did that, and now you can see that in call stack that we are now in outer function after the function definition is stored in memory. And now we're all calling the inner function, and when we call the inner function, you see we are now inside of this inner function. We call this inner function inside of our outer function, and then we call the inner function, and num is undefined. Okay, and we are turning that num with the plus the, and we did a mistake over here as well, that we didn't pass some value to it as well. We should have passed some num or 4 or something. And I'm gonna execute this now faster. And so num is now 3, and 3 plus 3 is gonna be 6. But the problem here is I cannot call this inner function outside of this function, and we can't take its output in global. So that's the issue, because we can directly call this or take its output into global like this, because it's not working. You can see that after it performs calculation, it just ends. Okay, because we call the outer function. So what we have to do is return inner function. So we are returning inner function label to the result. So now understand one thing, and I'm gonna like do one more thing over here, and I'm gonna do is counter plus plus over here, and I will explain why I did that. At line 162, outer function, we're calling the outer function and then storing that inner function into the results. When I call this outer function, this line executes, counter is gonna be 0 and inner function, and then return inner function. And when this execution context of outer function is gone, the inner function is gonna be stored where? Can you guess it? It's gonna be like stored in the local memory, it's gonna be stored in the global memory. Can you guess it? It's not gonna be stored into global memory because inside of the local execution context of outer function. But outer function executes completely. It's not gonna even store into the local execution context that outer function, because outer function execute completely. And then where will it go? It will go to another memory called heap memory. Heap memory. This is another permanent memory where the dynamic things call the function and the like whatever the dynamic stuff is stored into that memory. And we are assigning, listen carefully, when we call this function, the outer function executes completely and we are returning out at line 160, and this is gonna be stored into the heap memory, because first it's not in the global memory because it's inside of the memory of the outer function, so it's not in the global memory, so it's in the local memory of outer function, because when we call them and when we call the outer function, it's going to be in the local execution context of inner function. And I will show you that in my dev tools in a minute, and try to understand this also. So when I call this, and this is going to be, and then it's going to be like stored into the heap memory, and we will have a function label, and we are returning that label, and we are assigning that label to result. Okay, whenever like this label is going to be like some random into the memory, let's say like 100 12 or 11, it's going to be like something like that, and we are assigning that label to result. And whenever we call the result, okay, like result, we are calling the inner function because we returned out the inner function label and it's stored in the heap memory. And let's call this like a generated func or something, so we are very clear about that. Generated func, we are gonna call this 2 times. Let's first understand this, and let's not go into too much complexity. So let's first understand this, and then we will go into the deep concepts. Okay, we will add counter to our watch expression when it's gonna be added to, when it's gonna be increased. Okay, and return inner function, generate func. Okay, and I'm gonna refresh this. Okay, let's see. Now we are in the global, we are calling line number 163, and we are gonna be calling this outer function. We are now assigning 0 to the counter. Counter is now undefined, and we are assigning that counter is defined to 0. And now we are declaring the function and we are returning that function. Here we are just storing the inner function, and then we are, same mistake I would have to, when we store that into generated func, we would have to, this is going to be inner function and I will have to pass in something. So I'm going to pass in 3 and 3, and this time 4. I'm gonna do faster for now. Inner function. So we are now returning, we call the outer function. Now we are returning inner function. Its execution, you will see in a second. Now after I go to next line, okay, this outer function is gonna pop out of the call stack, and it's gonna be like and the inner function is gonna be inner functions label is gonna be stored in the generated func, and it's gonna be like inner function is now gonna be go into the heap memory, which is another memory, like, and the heap memory is another permanent memory which shows dynamic stuff, and you can like reference to this into your official documentation of JavaScript heap MDN. So you can see generated func is now allocated what you can see when I hold this, or you can see over here generated func is now assigned the function inner function, because we return the inner function and the generated func is now inner function. And whenever I call this generated func, this is going to reference to that what is stored in the heap memory. In heap memory it's inner function, and we are storing inner functions labeled into the generated func, and whenever we call that generated func, it's going to reference to that inner function which is stored in the inner function, and when we pass in some value, it's going to be passed into the inner function. Okay, so generated func into 3 is gonna be like passed into this, and we will see that we will go into the execution context of inner function, and its inner function is gonna be added to code stack. And you can see num is gonna be 3, I passed in 3, counter is gonna be plus plus. So you can see the execution context of outer function is now gone, and we are basically inside of the inner function. The outer function is gone. You can see in code stack the outer function is not in the code stack, we are in code stack, it is inner function, and we are trying to increase the counter plus plus. So will it increase the counter to 1 or not? If your answer is yes, then definitely yes, it will increase the counter by 1. How? Because the concept of layer is, so whenever a function is defined inside of another function like inner function, and when the outer function gets executed, the inner function gets access to all of the data that is surrounding to it with this like this data and whatever is like surrounding data, whatever is like there is, whatever the calculation is over here, and whatever is parameter over here, whatever is doing. So this inner function gets access to is surrounding state, which is called variable environment or a lexical environment, and it is also called like backpack or a variable environment or lexical environment or a surrounding state or a surrounding data, whatever you call it. And this surrounding data is also stored in the heap memory with the inner function. And when we like try to reference the counter, which is like in the surrounding, we are definitely can increase its value because we can combine them. This is the JavaScript concept of layers, because it has access to its surrounding data. The inner function has access to outer functions data or a variable. We call this variable environment. Okay, play that, and counter should now be increased to 1. Okay, yeah, counter increased to 1, and we are returning num plus 3. And because I didn't take its output in some variable, I would have to take that output into some variable to see num plus 3, 3 plus 3 is gonna be 6, and then we can say definitely it's in num plus 3 is happening and it's calculating. But because we are not taking its num plus 3, because we are returning that in, and we have to take its we have to take a return into some variable that I didn't do that in a second, and we will see that num plus 3 is gonna be like 6. It's not showing for that. So you can see the counter is gonna be now 2. Okay, and let's fix this. Let result is equal to generated func, and I'm gonna like print out the result, console log result. Okay, and I'm gonna like watch this variable as well into my watch expression, so whenever this increases I will be able to see it. Okay, so I'm gonna do that, and let's play it. Most of the stuff I already explained. Counter is 0, and now we are just gonna be seeing the generated func, which is gonna return out taking num and return out num 3 plus 3. Num is 3, gonna add 3 to it and return out whatever that is. So you can see a result is now 6. At previous it didn't do that stuff because I didn't like take its output in some variable. That makes sense. Counter is 1, result is 6, and the counter shows 1 when we like go to the next inner function. I don't know why, or probably because it's gonna be 6 and we are at line number 166, and when I do that is gonna be increased counter is gonna be 1, and now we are doing is we call generate func. We're gonna call this again. Generate func is gonna be 2. So the thing is, at first call is the counter does not increase to 1. I don't know why, but it should be. I don't know why it's not. Let's try to convert this function into the ES6 syntax. Okay, our function is equal to okay. Now counter is 1 at first call. Yeah, we are at line number 156. And did we execute? Wait, hold on. We are at now we're executing outer function. Let's go into it. Okay, we are now inner function. Now we're returning that inner function, assigning that to generated func, and now we're calling generated func, and when we call the generated func, the counter should be 1, and we call this, and we are now inside of inner function, and when we call this and the counter is 1. It's not working with the old writing of function syntax because arrow functions have something additional than the traditional functions. They have lexical static scoping. Lexical static scoping means they keep track of the variable where they was born. I may explain this concept in you can see my explanation on this on my arrow functions video. Okay, I explained that over there. So basically I'm like just giving you a brief overview of this because this is an arrow functions concept. It has something additional. They have lexical static scoping, and lexical static scoping means they keep track of the function variables where they was born. They know where did they come from. Just when we define it like old JavaScript syntax code, they do not know where counter came from. They might reference it the global one. The inner function might reference the counter, the global one. They don't know. But when we are using arrow functions, they know where the counter came from and they keep track of that. That's like a whole concept of that. So yeah, that is like basically the concept of players, the one of the most important concept. This is one of the most asked questions on the in the interviews. You should know it. You might be asking yourself like why should I need to use even clears? Reason for that, you may add some functionality to the user. So let's say this is a general user and this is a paid user. You want to add some functionality to the paid user and you want it to have some general functionality as well. You don't want the general user to have the functionality that the paid user have. Okay, if that makes sense. So we want to make them like the private or the paid user some specific or the special, and we want to give him some special features that the general user don't have. If you can say let name is equal to ZML, I'm giving you the simplest example of player. Okay, function, I'm giving a name of player function, and I would refer console log name. Let's give it my name. Okay, my name. I want to call player function, and let's close this and let's open our console, and we should see my name. Let my name is equal to ZML player function. It should call that. Let's clear out all the breakpoints. Remove all, remove this, and yeah, and we got that ZM. Yeah, this function is also using the layer because we can access the variable outside of this function, and this is in global. This is the simplest example of layer.